Hello and welcome back to Dreamseed VR. I'm your host Seraphin and this is episode 5, Dreams. This week in news we have some really exciting stories. I'm going to jump in on the psychedelic forefront because this week in Santa Cruz, psychedelics and entheogens were decriminalized. Yay! So Santa Cruz also happens to be the home of the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, who do incredible work helping the FDA approve research into the use of MDMA and psilocybin for anxiety and treatment for PTSD. Also in psychedelic news, there is a meetup happening called Meetdelic that's going to be in Los Angeles in May, and it's going to be featuring speakers like Rick Doblin from MAPS as well as Duncan Trussell and Russell Brand. There's also an upcoming conference about psychedelics and technology, Psychedelic in Tel Aviv in Israel. And you can check that out online as well. Rick Doblin is going to be one of their keynote speakers. In VR news, there were several immersive experiences that were debuted at Sundance Film Festival. This year we saw an immersive experience called Haifa VR, which is sort of a psychedelic mushroom simulator where you start out as a hypha, one of many mycelial filaments, and you encounter a vast network of roots as you remediate the soil at the trunk of a decaying tree, re-emerging from the soil as a mushroom sprout. Doesn't that sound amazing? When I first came across this story, it was so moving, I cried. I didn't even see video of the experience, but just reading the description in and of itself was an incredible fusion, my two loves of psychedelia and virtual reality. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, keep your eyes peeled for Haifa. It is, it's by Metrado Films, Haifa. Also at Sundance, developed by French studio Providence's Solastalgia is a spine-chilling mixed reality piece that takes a handful of users through a mixed reality graveyard filled with the ghostly memories of a long-forgotten human community spanning multiple generations. So it's a difficult project to describe, so let's just bring out a quote from the developers. You are one of 5 cosmonauts visiting a mysterious future, exploring the surface of the depopulated planet in ruin, colonized by lichens and a strange cloud of data filling the land with human ghosts. What does this curious landscape tell us about our lives? Projecting into the future of the Anthropocene epoch, Solastalgia is a meditation on today's tensions between the potentially redemptive power of technology and the scientific forecast of a compromised future. So that sounds really compelling, right? I would definitely keep an eye out for both Solastalgia as well as Haifa, which I said debuted at Sundance Festival in their immersive circuit. In tech news, Elon Musk's Neurallink plans its first brain chip implants for next year. So more than 2 years have passed since the world caught wind that Elon Musk planned on integrating our brains with our smartphones via a brain implant computer chip called Neurallink. We all remember his infamous Joe Rogan appearance. Well, it looks like there is a tentative date in the near future for those first prototypes. Here's a quote from Elon. He says, "With a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, we can actually go along for the ride, and we can have the option of merging with AI. It looks like this new chip will be called the N1. That doesn't sound ominous, does it? This week in book recommendations, I wanted to go into the Wayback Machine and introduce you to a personal favorite of mine that I first read when I was in high school. Now, this is a really heavy-duty book. It definitely requires a little bit of background on Gnosticism, which is a philosophical school of thought that I'll be breaking down a little bit. But this week, I wanted to recommend Philip K. Dick's Valis. This is an incredible book. It is essentially him recounting a spiritual experience he had in 1972 after being blasted in the third eye by a information-rich pink laser beam after he had his wisdom teeth removed. I'm not going to give away too much. It's extremely dense. It has a lot of references to work that he was obviously influenced by, but as well as some deep end theories about the nature of time and consciousness. I got it from my favorite bookstore, Pegasus Books in Berkeley. which happens to be in the same town where he lived for quite a while. Valis is really beautiful. It's difficult to wrap your head around sometimes. It can definitely trigger an existential crisis. Warning. There was a book he wrote later on in his career called Radio Free Albemuth, and that was translated into an indie film a number of years ago. I personally find the indie film really charming, and it also recounts that same experience he had, but a little bit more fictionalized. Radio Free Albemuth and Valis are very similar recountings of that experience. There's definitely some alternate reality vibes. There is an interesting presidential candidate that he makes mention of in Valis as well as Radio Free Albemuth, and you can interpret that however you want once you read it. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but he has an incredible fiction suit in this novel in particular that he calls Horse Lever Fat. Now, if you were to break down Philip K. Dick's name, it essentially translates into Horse Lever Fat. You have Phil, which is horse, right? And kindred, which is love, lover. And then Dick is fat. So Horse Lever Fat is the fiction suit that represents Philip K. Dick on his weird existential journey through encountering the Logos in his novel Valis. This is a classic. If you like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, if you like any of his other work, this is definitely more grounded in reality than it is a hardcore cyberpunk sci-fi. But the philosophical underpinnings of this are a wild ride that I recommend anybody brave enough to definitely treat themselves to. Valis. Also this week, I wanted to recommend an incredible little anime called Paprika. Now, Paprika is a gorgeously animated feature-length film, and it details the, amazing adventure of this weird dream recording and manifesting device. So running along that same theme of dreams, if you want to encounter this surreal new technology as seen through this anime, Paprika is a wild ride. It's got a lot of detail, a lot of surrealism, a lot of flavor. Paprika, get it? But yeah, Paprika's awesome. Check that one out. And another recommendation that we have this week in terms of films is The City of Lost Children. Now, The City of Lost Children doesn't necessarily look like a cyberpunk film on the surface, but it actually is very much in that genre dynamic of high-tech meets low society. Now, in The City of Lost Children, there is that similar theme of a dream-related technology where this little mad scientist is siphoning the dreams of children and kidnapping them in order to do so. Now, I don't want to give too many away regarding that, but it's by an incredibly talented French director, and it has Ron Perlman in it as well. And it's got a gorgeous, dark, noir kind of texture to the cinematography, and it's a beautiful film. And it also has some really interesting undertones about the nature of dreams and some pretty surreal dream sequences as well. So The City of Lost Children is our movie recommendation for this week. I know the headlines have been spooky this past week, considering all of the talk about the new coronavirus, but I figured if you want to brush up on some of your apocalyptic zombie skills, you can head on over to Steam and check out Arizona Sunshine, which is a title that happens to be available in VR and is on sale in several bundles over there. So if you need to take your mind off of the headlines and prep yourself with some real-world zombie skills, check out Arizona Sunshine. So this week, I figured I would introduce you to an interesting philosophical term that relates to theology that I find really fascinating, and that word is Gnosticism. Now, some of you might be familiar with the word agnostic, which essentially means to not know. When you're admitting that you don't know about something, you say, oh, agnostic, right? Well, Gnosticism is quite the opposite. It means to know. Gnosticism is an idea that comes up frequently in the work of Philip K. Dick. You could even see Gnostic themes in the comic book that I previously shared with you, The Invisibles, as well as the work inspired by those comics, The Matrix. Neo has a very Gnostic revelatory experience regarding his awareness of the Matrix. Now, Gnosticism is described as a collection of ancient religious ideas and systems which originated in the 1st century AD among early Christian and Jewish sects. These various groups, labeled Gnostics by their opponents, emphasize personal spiritual knowledge over orthodox teachings. Now, this is a really tough cookie to crumble. If you're even remotely curious about Gnosticism, I highly recommend you check it out for yourself. It's not something that I can do justice by giving you a download about. I was personally really fascinated with Gnosticism in high school, right around the same time that I started reading Philip K. Dick's work. I also read a great deal of the Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels. Now, there are some interesting texts regarding the archaeological history of the Gnostic Gospels and how that came about being found. In particular, there seems to be a reoccurring theme in Gnosticism about the nature of the universe being created by an imperfect deity. And that's one of the reasons the Gnostics explain the suffering of the universe, is that it was created by an imperfect creator, and that being was created by a godhead, sort of like the fountainhead of a god. This is where it gets weird, and is definitely just philosophical fanfare. I'm not trying to influence anybody on a spiritual level. I just find it very fascinating personally, especially the way it's reiterated in science fiction, and in particular relates to simulation theory. So if you want to, you can check out the concept of the Demiurge, which is sort of what the robots in the Matrix were like. You know, the artificial intelligence creating an artificial simulated world with which to house and siphon off of the energy of the humans. It's sort of an allegory for the Gnostic Demiurge and the trapping of the human spirit in materia, in the pleroma, which is their word for this sort of onion layered multi-dimensional universe where we sit at one of the lower layers of 3D-ness. So forgive me for getting weird about it. Thank you for going on that little ride. Gnosticism is your word of the week. And some weeks we won't dive into concepts, some weeks we will, but I figured it would be an interesting one to tie into our theme of dreams this week. You know, that cute little row your boat thing. Life is but a dream. So enjoy that little nugget. I'm going to introduce a new section to our weekly little chats. We're going to be doing a tilt brush spotlight, where each week I introduce you to the work of a tilt brush artist that I find particularly beautiful. You can check out these works at Poly Google. And Poly is a branch of Google that hosts 3D models. They host them from several different programs, including Tilt Brush as well as Google Blocks. I personally am a huge fan of Tilt Brush. It's one of my go-to mediums when I want to paint and draw in virtual reality. And I've been watching many other artists in that medium for the better part of the past year and a half. And one of my personal favorites that I was first really inspired by happens to be an artist named Danny Bittman. Now, Danny's work has been featured in the Marvel Universe as a cool 3D piece inspired by Doctor Strange, and that was the first piece of his that I came across. He was commissioned by Marvel to create that one. But his own personal work is beautiful. He has an amazing sense of color and atmospheric depth, and he has a cool cyberpunk sensibility about some of his pieces. One of his pieces, I'll be giving you a link in the description as well as describing the title and stuff right here, but it's sort of a working from home theme, which is cute because it's definitely set in a sort of future metropolitan city with the individual, the protagonist of this piece, looking out onto sort of like a canyon of skyscrapers, which I found really ethereal. It was just really beautiful and dreamy, and I find that a lot of his work has a great sense of depth and dreaminess to it, while still being grounded in a vibe that you could just like walk into one of his pieces. It has it's like a waking dream. It's really beautiful. Anyway, Danny Bittman's work is incredible, and over the next several weeks and into the future, I'll be sharing more amazing tilt brush artists that I come across. And I highly recommend you check out the featured work on the front page of Google, where you might just happen to find some of my pieces over the past year. Anyway, thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this broadcast and our other broadcasts, you can check out our website. It's dreamseedvr.com, as well as support us on Patreon, which would be patreon.com/Seraphin. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you next week.